The following is a production of Texas Lutheran University. For more information, please visit tlu.edu.
I want to thank John McCluskey and Debbie for putting this together. We haven't had a Schola in a while, but look at the productivity of this faculty. Way to go, team. We are a community of faith and a community of learning, but moreover, we're a community of scholars. This is what we do. And as assessment gets more and more, it's more, I think it becomes more difficult to find time for our scholarship. And this is what we really love, and that's why we're university professors to a long extent. The Schola, from the New Latin Casellas Dictionary that I no longer own, means a learned discussion, a group of scholars coming together. And it's my privilege and joy to be on this faculty with such a distinguished group of people. Our first speaker today, and he's going to have little 3-minute vignettes, and I'm going to ask others on the list to do a 1-minute, what I did in the last 4-year book kind of a thing, and then we'll enjoy the wine and cheese. Steve has to pick up kids, so Steve Roman is going to go first off the bat and talk about stuff. The thing I like about Steve, I know nothing about zombies. I don't like them. So, Steve.
3 minutes?
About 3 minutes.
Are you guys start cutting things?
Yeah.
All right, so this is mine, the Zombie Guide to Public Speaking. It's mostly about public speaking with a few pieces of sort of zombie things to pander to the students. I do use it as a metaphor, and I think it's relevant, but so I can say lots of different things, but in 3 minutes I want to talk a little bit about self-publishing maybe, since, it's like a fake book, right? But it feels real at the same time. I was inspired by Phil and Beth doing the TLU Reader to try to find another way to deliver this stuff to the students. Like anybody who writes a textbook, I write it because I think I'm the only one who understands it, and I have to tell the world that they're all doing it wrong. And so, unfortunately, I couldn't find enough people who agreed with me to give me a book deal for it. So I did it myself. So the benefit of doing it yourself is no one can tell you did it wrong, and the problem with doing it yourself is nobody's telling you did it wrong, so then you're stuck with it, right? And so there's that. Plus, it turns out editing your own work, that's a really long, complex process that I totally didn't fully understand until I started. There's a level of months and months of bashing your head against things, and I know now I feel looks like he does. It's so much.
It wasn't my stuff that was going on.
Well, he complained the vacuum and not putting it together. It was all my fault. So, self-publishing is it's interesting. The sort of Amazon services that go with it, because that's the way I went with it, turned out to be really surprisingly easy to use, even though Lana was like, I don't know. And so there is that. So if you're considering doing that for your own courses, it's surprisingly easy to use, and I'm happy to help anybody who's interested in going that route. It's like a Kindle edition, which turned out to be another month-long odyssey of nightmare formatting. Don't ever put a table in anything if you ever want to publish for Amazon. Just so you know. No tables ever. And so that's not good. But so it was interesting, and I tried to write a book in such a way that was sort of really dense with ideas, but tried to write it as easy as possible for the students to read. I don't like the public speaking books in my field. They're all 550 pages. They all cost $75, and I disagree with like 2/3 of what's in them. So I just ended up spending the semester complaining about the book, so I decided to do that instead. But so in the end, my son did the cover art. It was like a family affair. I think it was worthwhile. I think it was good to do. So if any of you are thinking of doing it, I think it's helpful, and it means something different to the students to do that than to read your content on your website, which I have a lot of for my pop culture class, where they can go there and get the stuff that I wrote. So having it in book form, I don't know, because a lot of what I do with public speaking is the last thing I'll say. I have very specific views on PowerPoint and how many people I think are doing it wrong. And so part of what my teaching is a persuasive endeavor to tell them that they're doing it wrong and they need to shift their behavior. That's different than the persuasive task of here's stuff that we need to learn, and here's why you should learn it. In this case, it's really telling them they're doing it wrong. And that persuasive task requires a different kind of credibility than the kinds of lecture notes that I was giving them before. And so even though it's not, published by Columbia University or something like that, it still has a little bit more weight with them. I found it easier to do things that I want with the students having it in this form.
Thank you for saying that.
Questions for Steve?
I've got a question. Have you thought, is there any noise about people self-publishing and then shopping it around, looking for an agent, looking for someone who would like to publish it in a larger?
I don't know. I haven't gotten it maybe because my book isn't interesting enough or popular enough. But once you self-publish, there's a set of people who will call you and email you trying to market your book for you. And if you pay them a small fee, so there's that garbage that comes with it. But I don't know about the other stuff just because it hasn't been there. And I actually don't know exactly what Amazon or CreateSpace's policy is on them taking the book and shopping it somewhere else, because I wasn't that interested in it, so I didn't care. But I imagine there's limitations if you choose to go that route. But I have copyright, right? I mean, so.
Can you just mention the price of the book?
Yeah, so we're selling the book at the bookstore and on Amazon for about $12. And there's a Kindle edition also. There's a new Kindle thing now that if you buy the book, then you can get like the Kindle version for like $2. I don't know if anybody uses Kindle besides me, but they're there, so you have an electronic version. And so that's useful. So it's inexpensive, which is good. So it saves them $60 on their book. And so I feel good about that.
And the production costs per book?
Yeah, it costs like $2.50 to $3 per book, something like that. I'm trying to remember, $2.75, to produce. So when Lana orders them from CreateSpace, there's that plus a shipping charge, and so she's able to mark that book up, and so I think it's a good deal for the bookstore as well. And plus, it's a good deal for the students, and so the $65 that the students are spending to help the publishing companies isn't happening. So I think that's a good deal. The part of me that's Marxist likes that.
It's only a tiny part.
It's just it's a tiny.
Thank you, Steve. The author we're going to celebrate is Angie Sauer. People may not know about our history department, but it's so cool. I had a teacher many years ago that taught me how to write in the history department because she would always say history is literature. And I think Professor Sauer's work and others before her shows that we have a literary scholar history department that does excellent work. Angie, would you talk about some of your work?
Sure. Sorry, I have some notes, so that's probably the first violation of the economic that I've just come from doing something completely different. I have 3 pieces of advice for you. If you want to take notes, everybody take out a pen. Sorry, I'm in teaching mode. The first one would be patient with your publisher. The second one is be kind to your editor. Right? You've been there. I've been an editor. And the third one would be confident in your material. What really is the difference between publishing a chapter in a book like this or this or this? This one is cool. I want to circulate that because both myself and Robin Bisha have a chapter in there. So please take a look at Robin's chapter.
You can always use your gift certificate to buy any of these books.
Okay. So what's the difference between publishing a book chapter, a chapter in a book that's a collection, and publishing a peer-reviewed scholarly article in a scholarly journal? I thought about that and I go, why am I publishing so many book chapters? I'm a coward. No. To me, really, it's a different stage in the research process. My research goes like this. I start research. Once I have enough material, I go to conferences. And I present the material, and I collect ideas, I get feedback, I get an idea of whether or not this will go anywhere, and then I keep going. Once that research develops further and becomes more solid, I start sending out my research to specialized scholarly journals. At that stage in the process, you have to have a very thick skin. I'm sure all of you have done it, because you will get rejected. And if you don't get rejected, you get a peer review back. That's kind of, ouch. Seriously? But that is the process where your paper starts becoming a really good piece of work. Because those peer reviews, when you get over yourself and you go, oh, this picture, yeah, they're right. Sorry, what did I swear? I do though when I get those peer reviews back. At that point, you improve your material and it becomes worthy of being published in a scholarly journal. Once you're in that more final stage where you're just really confident, you know your stuff, you know this is, at that point, the definitive word on this very tiny little specialized topic. That's when you get into books as a book chapter. So at this point, you're going to realize when you publish in a book, how do you get into a book? Well, it's either a conference that has a theme, and that was how Robin and I got into this book. We went to a horrible place, Paris. Horrible. And we went to this conference, and the conference organizers decided they wanted to have a book come out of this, and so this ended up being a book. Sometimes somebody already has an idea for a book, and they know that you have a special expertise, and they will invite you to contribute. So this is how some of those collections came together for me. Now I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this? Remind me. Where was I going with this? Yes, France did it for me. France, I see wine, I go out in a different universe all over the sudden.
How do you get in a book? You can go to a conference.
How do you get into this book? Yeah, okay, so let's say you got invited. This is where the Be Kind to Your Editor comes in, and I know Phil has been an editor. I've done this, and I did this early, and then ever since then, I've only submitted chapters. Because being an editor is a horrible job, so I know now how to be kind. When they give me instructions, I follow them. When they give me a deadline, I meet the deadline. I do not submit something that is poorly written and not proofread. You would not believe what comes to these collections. So be kind to your editor, because your editor will they will do all the hard stuff. They will meet with the publisher. They will pull it all together. They will make sure it makes sense. So the least you can do is, for example, read the other chapters. Make sure that you tie in somehow, that you refer to the other chapters. Do that job for them so they don't have to do it. The last point, very briefly, my least favorite part of this process is the publisher. And my biggest beef is with this one, which is Duke University Press. Woohoo!
Dr. G's on the line.
It's a great university press. They publish great books, but they're stingy. So the editor submitted a manuscript that was really fat, I have to admit, it was big. And they said, cut it in half. So instead of tossing out some contributions, the editor said, everybody cut your piece in half. Everyone all went, oh my God, it can't be done. And it was done. So lots of crying, gnashing of teeth, tearing of hair. It was done. So they resubmitted it, peer reviews came back, really favorable. And then they said, we had our budget cut, you need to cut another third out. At which point, all the authors went on strike. We said, no way is there going to be any more cutting. So these two editors, bless their hearts, hired a professional copy editor to go through all our pieces. They did that, lo and behold, they cut a third out of it. I got my piece back, I didn't see the difference. This is very sad. It shows you how bloated your own way is. Every single word in there is absolutely essential. So it got published, but the sad thing about the story, I'm going to end on a sad note. Other thing about the publisher, you've got to be patient. Because a lot of these chapters, I did during my sabbatical, which was so long ago, I can't even remember it. So it takes years and years sometimes. In this case, Nora Ferris, who was one of the editors, was in the terminal stage of cancer. We told Duke University, please get this book out. They got it out 4 weeks after she died. But this is for Nora. She was a wonderful scholar, and this is a great collection. And that's all I have to say.
Questions for Dr. Sauer?
Steve, what do you have to say about never end on a sad note?
John has.
Oh, no, it's good if you help you.
Help me, please.
Do you find most of the editors to make the book in the conferences, or are there other?
It's the other way around. It's a conference that seems to work really well together, where everybody or a part of the participants have stuff that relates to each other, and then they want to bring this out in book form. So it's usually that way around, that you have a conference first, and then you go from there into a book. And those were conferences. There's several different ones, and I have to say in several different countries. I just recommend checking out international conferences.
You like to travel.
Thank you, Auntie. The third and last of these 3-minute vignettes, and then we're going to do maybe 1 minute with each of the other authors, is Bill Davis. Bill, he forgot to bring his book over here. Actually, he was in seminar with some students, and he came over at the last minute. But I watched him as his colleague write this book over a period of a couple of years. And he was going to make me read something of it, but I'd have to go back and take chemistry again to pronounce everything the right way. But it's a book on physical chemistry. And we have a wonderful math department here to teach chemistry. But if you really want to learn calculus, the math department that teaches calculus, if you really want to learn calculus, you take physical chemistry with Bill Davis. Bill, come up and say a couple words.
That's all you're going to get is a couple words. One word, yeah. Well, I guess my story stems from not having an appropriate book in the discipline, in my opinion. A lot of the current physical chemistry books are 1,200 pages long, totally inappropriate for a 2-semester class. So I endeavored to sort of simplify things. So the book I wrote is about 500 pages. You can easily get through it in 2 semesters. It's specifically written for the class that I teach. And I actually didn't have that hard of a time with the publisher. I essentially just contacted the publisher. It was a smaller publisher. It was an imprint of Taylor and Francis, CRC Press. And they were interested immediately, so I guess I got lucky. Luck sometimes is better than skill. But yeah, the writing was a little bit arduous. I think Squire's probably heard me swearing a few times in my office every once in a while. But so far it's been, the students like it because they tell me that it sounds exactly, the book reads like the way I teach.
Well, I can say the beauty of this particular book, we're down in the hall and we moved Bill out of that horrible, dysfunctional office that chemistry's had for years into a nice office. There's not a day that goes by, last when he's teaching, there's not about 10 kids on the floor, and Bill is like a band director teaching problems on the blackboard through the book, and he's worked every one of those problems himself to put them in the book. So it's a great teaching tool. The kids like it, not so much while they're in it, but when they come out, they know how to work calculus, and they know physical chemistry. So, Bill, final words? Questions for Bill?
How long have you been using your book?
2 years. It was published December 2011.
Are others using your book?
A couple schools. I basically bribed one of my friends in Canada.
How long did it take you to write 500 pages?
A couple years.
When does the next edition come out?
You have to ask the publisher. Right?
They're just going to switch chapter 2 and 3.
Well, one of the things I wanted them to do is keep the price down. I mean, a lot of the books in this area are $300. Mine's $99.
You made 17.
Yes, 17 cents.
Did you write a little bit every day or try to find chunks of time? What was your writing?
A lot of big chunks were over, Christmas break and during the summer. But a little every day was not a bad idea.
Thank you, Bill. Phil, I'm going to let you maybe say a word for David Baer's book, since he's not here, or we'll just skip it.
I haven't read it, so. It's in the bookstore. Because I know it was successful enough that it had been in I think, hardcover, and it came out in softcover, and they wanted to repeat it again. And just a word on the work he's doing is that he's been recognized as an expert in this in terms of church-state relations in Hungary, and he received that Peace Award, which we all think is hilarious because peace isn't the first word that comes to mind. David. And so he's done testimony at international human rights events, and for the Congress he's been an expert witness. So it's kind of interesting that his work has gone that way, and they haven't jailed him yet. During his sabbatical. So.
Thank you. One of the things I'm really proud about this faculty is when freshmen come in here, they get to read Beth and Phil's reader with our faculty authors contributing. So, Joe, Beth, would you and Phil like to say a couple words about that?
It was Phil's idea, so you want to speak to it?
It's like my baby, and it's very sweet and has major problems that I won't talk about publicly. I've turned it over to other hands, and they will perform the operations that are needed. But I can say that it was, people were really, I had really good editor experience with this volume. People listened to the instructions we had, followed timelines really well, and I really like all the pieces in it. Whether or not it serves all the purposes of Brex, I guess, is the question. It's one of the things we try to do is get them to think in context, and everybody's writing out of the same context because we're all from TLU, and so that's a weakness of the book. But I think the fact that it was dedicated to Linda kind of motivated people to put the time in and write it. And so thanks. Lots of, like, who are the authors that have written in it? So you could raise your hand.
One thing worth mentioning just as we move forward, because we will be revising, is that the TLU Reader was being developed at the same time that the reading competency was being developed, and those two things were, in the TLU tradition, not talking to each other.
Which is really sad because I was doing both of them. I was like in charge of both of them. So.
You were talking to yourself.
But he did such a great job of changing hats that we just weren't really thinking about the ways in which these two things needed to talk to each other. So as we go forward with revisions, that's the plan, is to figure out how we can do a better job. But I think, hands down, there's no better way to, I mean, apart from sitting in our offices, which we know can be an intimidating thing for first-year students to do, it's a great way for them to meet you without taking the risk other than to actually sit down and read, which is a little bit of a challenge. The other thing I would say about the editing process was, you're all still talking to me, so I guess I didn't say anything that was terribly damaging. But Jermaine probably won't mind that I'll say this, that she said, well, I figured the third time you told me to do something, you were being so consistent that I decided to go ahead and take your advice. So, if nothing else, it was a pretty consistent process, and hopefully not too painful. But that work is in progress always. That's a fluid text. We actually have a submission from a student, Fernando Rover, wrote a chapter that is currently under consideration. If you have ideas for a chapter and you want to approach us, let us know. We would just ask you to keep in mind the reading competency.
Beth is working on a new book with her daughter, who's at TCU, on how to still love your mom and not responding to her 10 texts a day. So that's in progress. But Norm Beck, I consider our senior scholar on the faculty, only brought over, within the last 3 years, 8 of his 10 works that he has brought over. As you know, Norm is a prodigious published scholar and a world authority on Christian, Jewish, and Arab relationships. And it's just been my pleasure to be on the faculty with Norm for 34 years. So I'd like to ask Norm to say a few words about what's going on with you.
Some of you may know Ron Berg, who wrote
Yes.
an article in the Vista for many years, and it was always the most interesting. In fact, it's the only part of the Vista I generally read. It was very interesting, very textual. And he was asked when he retired, how he felt about writing, and he said, "I hate to write, but I like to have written." That's the way I feel. I like to write, but I like to have written. And that's why I've never taken a sabbatical to write, because I didn't. The idea of sitting and writing day after day after day was a horrible thought. I do it, as you said, during vacation times. And just very quickly, suggestions for the younger ones among you, and many of you are younger.
I'm still young.
It's important to develop a specialty, obviously, when you start teaching. So you can develop a specialty and work that, and then to work in groups, collaborative, going to meetings, as Angie, I think, especially mentioned. You build some networking, and that helps you immensely. In fact, it'd be very difficult to do much without doing it that way. And finally, I think in connection with what has already been said, there are 3 steps in book writing. The first is to write the book, and that seems to take a long time. You spread it out. The second is to get it published. We talked a little bit about that. That's not easy. furthest to market it, and that's probably the hardest, to have it used, to market it. So that's my suggestions for those of you who will be doing those things. And it's nice not to have to do those things anymore. I can turn down requests from publishers to do something big and time-consuming. Why should I? I need it to get tenure. And so it's nice when you reach that point when you don't have to do it unless you want to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ron's working on a new book that may be at another school, and it's called The Translation of the New Testament in Ancient Hindu Chaldea. Just kidding. But he could probably do it. Another part of our history department is Rebecca. And Rebecca has some to say about some of her scholarship.
I have a couple of book chapters in 2 different books, and I'm actually working on 2 others this year. And they both have to do with violence. One's regional. It's violence in South Texas during Reconstruction. I do racial violence against former slaves. And the other is violence against freed women right after the Civil War in all of Texas, not just in the regional area. And both of those came about from conferences. They weren't collections of conference papers, but I had people who were in the same area, mostly Texas history, who were editing collections, and they invited me to submit a chapter for those. The one I'm working on right now is a little bit different, and I was approached by Frank Delateja at Texas State, and he received a grant from the Summerfield Foundation to put together a book on Texas during unionism during the Civil War, since it's 150th anniversary of all of that for the next few years. And so I'm actually going to get paid for that one since we have a grant, so that's kind of nice, a few $100. And so that's what I'm doing.
Thank you very much. I see Jack here, but you can read that he has a...
This book is there. If you want to hold it, it's the green one next to the yellow one.
So, a word or two?
You can, yeah. I don't even know if it's Leibniz or Leibniz, so somebody can email me on
It's
that.
one of the great polymaths of the modern world, as well as being among the greatest rationalist metaphysicists of the post-medieval age. He built the first mechanical calculator capable of multiplication and division.
This is Leibniz, not Jack.
We'll put this on our reader list here. Okay, Bill's already talked. Anna Maria has a nice volume of work. I'd like her to come up and say a few words.
Well, first, I think that this is a great opportunity for us to share, what we have done. Normally, I would do this at a conference, and then nobody at TLU really what I'm doing at a conference. So I'm like, finally, I have the opportunity to share this with you. La Cristiana actually comes from my dissertation. As you can see, it's a very extensive piece of work, and that was really my first inspiration to say, well, I think that it's going to be very hard for me to find a market, for La Cristiana. It's a 12-book poem about the passion and death of Jesus Christ, and that is what is called La Cristiana. The name comes from Christ. And it's a 12-book poem. You can think about the Iliad or the Odyssey, it's something similar. And when I realized, how little in the Latin American world we know about this author, Diego de Ojeda from Spain, I realized, wow, if we know, all of these wonderful pieces from Greece, from Italy, why is that we don't know these from Latin America, especially, in Spanish? So I decided to do it, and my edition is annotated. So I try to provide as much, as many explanations as possible, because it's really, it's more like an encyclopedia. So it's just a very dense piece of work. It's not even easy for us to read, in Spanish, because it's all in perfect verse, in perfect rhyme. So it's just it's a challenge. But as Dr. Beck, indicated, the next step is the marketing. So my goal would be at least to approach, all the institutions that have some kind of colonial studies program, for them to say, well, I have these, this would be perfect for the students to learn, what So that was my first inspiration. Then I had my personal collection of poems, Seguin stories, Sam Flores, who passed away 2 years ago also. It's an interview that I had with him, and I decided to publish it. Salome Ureña de Enriquez is another poet from Dominican Republic. And the inspiration that I have for this book is because when I decided to present some of her work at a conference, I realized that the book was not available. So all I was able to find was Google, the Google books that we have now, that is just like facsimile copy of whatever edition they have years ago, and that's exactly what I published that. And the one that I have been working on recently is a collection of stories of immigrants. And this came because I go to the AP exams every year, and I realized at one point that all the Spanish professors, that were grading AP exams were coming from different countries in Latin America. I will have someone from Nicaragua, someone from Argentina, etc. And then we realized, where are we together? So, and I provide that as, in the explanation why is that I decided to put this together. I invited them and I said, can we tell our story as immigrants? And that's exactly why we have the first volume in 2012. And then the following, during the AP reading, I presented the book and everybody was like, wow, I can't believe that you did it by yourself. And then I said, would you like to tell the story? So as I presented the second one. And this is also my photos. The cover of both volumes are my photos. This one from Mexico, this one from Honduras. And I just got this one in Honduras during our last mission trip. And I immediately realized, it has to be with that, the cover for the second volume. And now I'm working on a third volume. So I think that has been really motivating for everybody to tell our story.
Muchas gracias. Clayton? Rebecca, you want to speak about Clayton Jewett's book?
Oh, he is.
Battlefield and Beyond, Essays on the American Civil War.
Yes, and I have not read that, and he is the editor of that volume. So he's the one that goes out and collects people to submit chapters, and I think he's been the editor for that press for several years for LSU.
Terry Price has a work, Theatrical Design in Works Changing Landscape. Terry couldn't be with us today, so we honor his work in our dramatic media department. I hear that Dave Lagore is writing a new movie, and it's called Bubba's Going to Get Betty Off into a Double Wide and Have the Wheels Off in 2 years. I don't know, that's just what I hear. Bad joke. Phil has a text. Would you come up and talk about it, or sit and talk, or whatever you feel comfortable doing?
Mine's the thickest book out there, I'm pretty sure, but I didn't write it out. I would like to echo some of the things that Norm said in terms of be nice to people. And that, when you're in groups, I went into a group where a lot of the scholars were older, and I just took on some of the tasks that are odious to do for conferences in terms of getting people. And so I made friends in a group, that in turn befriended me. And my area of research is on, I like Norm's suggestion about find one thing that you care about. And I do performance of the New Testament material because I think that's how it was originally experienced. And so I was asked by the Oxford Encyclopedia of Biblical Interpretation. It's only $150 if you want to buy both volumes because you're so enchanted by what I say. And I wrote a 10-page thing on oral interpretation of Scripture that's in here. It's kind of a summary of the field. It was nice that some of the people I know personally, I could kind of do. I felt like I was doing shout outs to friends. And then the coolest thing is once I got it, I did what I had to do. I looked in the back to see if my name was in the index besides where I wrote, and somebody wrote a page about me in their thing on performance. So that was really cool.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. Angie, so I'm next on the list. This is my textbook. It's called Exercise Physiology and Integrated Approach. And Norm, your advice is so right on. I wrote my first book in 1980. I just finished at Baylor College of Medicine. It was called Exercise and Heart Disease, Theory and Application of Public School Physical Education. My professors back then saw this pandemic that is happening back then. So I've dedicated most of my career to working with not the kid that can run the first base as fast, but the kid who's picked last. And now we have a huge healthcare crisis. This, the editor came to us, and if you didn't like your editor before you started into it, you'll really eat him out. Picked about 4 of us out that had done a lot of work in this field. Dr. Peter Raven is past chairman of the medical school at Department of Physiology, University of North Texas, and was past president of the American College of Sports Medicine and editor of exercise science. So he was what the editor called the bell cow. He probably had the most wide reputation. I was the only one that taught undergraduate exercise physiology. So we've been beta testing this book for several years in our ex-phys classes. Dr. Dave Wasserman is probably one of the world's foremost authorities. He's a full professor of biochemistry at Vanderbilt, and he has a knockout mouse chronically obese strain where he actually does basic science on looking at the genetic basis of obesity. We're finding more and more out. It's just not exercise and diet. There's a whole bunch of other things involved in that. So it's been a privilege to be able to work in 2 departments that allowed me to do that. I appreciate my colleagues for giving me time. This is a 7-year process, and we're going to a 2nd edition. It's getting some legs under it. But writing is, I don't like to do it all that much, but it's something that we all do. And when it gets out there and then people are starting to do that and we're making some change on the obesity and child fitness front, it makes one feel reasonably good. So Melanie is our next author.
Well, we have to applaud for you.
No more bad jokes.
Okay, well, mine's a bit different. Mine came about because I served on a national think tank looking at the future of accounting higher education. And so it's called the Pathways Commission, and my particular role in that is I completed a study of the competencies or content specifications that the various credentialing organizations, both in the U.S. and internationally, were looking at for their accounting graduates. So I will not self-publish this because it is full of tables. And it is chapter 7 in that, and if you think something is difficult to get agreed upon across TLU, try getting something agreed upon across the nation. And my punishment or reward for doing all of this work is to be part of Pathways Phase 2. So we are now working at the next iteration, which takes it a bit deeper, and that's probably going to be another year in the works. But it was an interesting process. It did lead to, we talk in alphabet, so PCAOB, which is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, which is part of the Securities and Exchange Commission that has oversight for auditors of publicly traded companies. So that work led to a consulting gig for the PCAOB and an invitation to their closed conference. So I've been able to attend that. So it's been interesting how that has morphed into some other aspects. But anyway, it was interesting work, and it's informed our accounting program, so I think it's been helpful here as well.
Last minute notes from John. Robin Bishop has a book out, Zena's Jade, Cheshire Loves Karma. She's working on
I think it's a publisher.
Pardon me?
That's Cheshire Love Karma is a publisher.
Yeah, her 2 cats.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well,
we just learned that she has a chapter
And there, yes.
Yeah.
That's right. In here.
And she's
Yeah, I don't know
working on
why you mentioned that.
a self-help manual, how to get a possum out of my kitchen cabinet. So,
Still researching that.
she could, non-violently. Mike, you got something in the works we see here, Brothers of Life?
Yeah, that's already out, but you'll notice some of this is in the other category. So this is actually not academic at all. It's not in my vita, but it's a project that I did with my brother that was really, really meaningful for me to do. So if you want to know anything about self-publishing, I can tell you an awful lot about that. So if you're ever interested in self-publishing some stuff, academic or not, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. But it's
He's also
something
invented,
outside.
Mike's also invented a diagnostic test on how to determine if you're really eating Cheetos.
That's right.
I know that many other books are in the pipeline and coming out. Who? Oh, I forgot. Betsy Gale and Colleen Wren wrote The Big Bunny on Tricycle Press. How cool! Children's books is really
It's
difficult.
adorable. It's a children's book, and the big bunny is overweight. It's like bigger than all the other bunnies.
We'll put that in my book.
He's not perfect.
He's just really big.
But yeah, it's a really cute and
My kids love
yeah, it has a nice lesson in it. I think it's really neat. That she wrote with her mother.
Her mom illustrated the book.
How cool! Well, Phil,
But I just want to mention that in the past, we've had groups that would get together when people had a chapter they were writing, and it'd be interdisciplinary. And usually whoever was doing it would bring libations and some snacks. And it's been real fruitful whenever we've done it, because it's not, you get, often like in my area, I know more about this than a lot of Bible people do, but I forget that when I'm writing. So when I have people who haven't studied it at all, they can point out the places where I'm making leaps that are not helpful. And so if anybody has something they're working on and they want help pulling that together, I'd really love to do that. There have been some of the coolest times at TLU sitting around and doing that.
And I would second that, because I sat there and I knew nothing about what they were writing, but it was still very interesting, and it's kind of a way to learn a little bit about what other people do. I found that very intriguing.
last Thanksgiving, I was invited to President Trout at Texas State's house for a book signing as well. We have more books here than the whole faculty of Texas State had at that book signing. I want to honor my colleagues for what you do every day. Teaching full loads is tough. Assessment is really tough. But let's enjoy the wine and cheese, and thank you, Dr. Kupfer and Dr. McCluskey, for hosting us.
Thank
Students at TLU engage in high-impact educational experiences that include civic engagement, aesthetic expression, critical thinking, and a focus on intercultural knowledge in a community that welcomes the interplay of faith and reason.